Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Phoenix here. And we all know that in each and every bull run, there are some really hot narratives that pretty much take over and outperform everything else. And I am of the firm conviction that AI is going to be the hottest narrative of this bull run. There's a lot of talk about DePIN, there's talk about the gaming sector, and I think they're all going to do well. But I strongly believe that AI will outperform. And I actually have some very specific reasoning that I'm going to share with you today. Exactly why I believe that, and also why I believe that TAO will continue to be the king and outperform every other AI token or coin that it exists. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to remind you, first of all, let me remind you before I get into this chart, that the AI sector, this niche in cryptocurrency, currently has a $17.5 billion market cap. That's a very small market share. If we divide that into the $2.25 trillion market cap of all of cryptocurrency, that's still relatively small. And if we compare that to just NVDIA, which has over a $2 trillion market cap, that's 114 times the market cap of all of the crypto tokens and coins taken together. Okay, so let's just keep that in perspective as we move forward here. So now this chart, let me explain. All of these, I'm showing all of the major players from the last bull run. These are mostly the L1s because let's face it, that was one of the biggest narratives in the last bull run. Of course, I have Uniswap in here just for fun, and Dogecoin too. But we're looking at when they took off relative to Bitcoin. And how did I know when this happened? Well, I just pulled up all of their Bitcoin pairs, right? So I wanted to see when were they showing a lot of strength breaking out of a range of relative to Bitcoin, okay? And when did they continue to move up from there? So that's one of the keys here. And so you can see for ADA, I marked it. It was around February 6th of 2021. This is a 3-day chart, of course, that I'm dealing with here. Some of them were earlier, some of them were later. Some of them are grouped together here because it was around the same time. April 25th, Matic. And I'm sure many of you will remember these, but it's very clear. And when you can see when they really started to take off, and that's when they had their parabolic moves. Okay, so this is important to keep in mind. And so I did this for all of the L1s from the last bull run, or many of them. And what you'll notice is something really curious. With the exception of Link was in sort of an early one. It popped off pretty early in the bull run, but they all waited until well after Bitcoin had surpassed its previous all-time highs at around 20K. And this is we're talking weeks and months, and in some cases a year or longer. Okay, so you can see Uniswap and DOT. These were some of the earlier ones that Bitcoin, mind you, from this point, it had already increased about 90 to 100% from the previous all-time highs. Okay, so this is maybe you're starting to put the pieces together here, because these really, especially even with Solana and Avalanche and Luna, you can see these were actually some of the top performers, right, of the last bull market, but they didn't do it until after Bitcoin had already reached all-time highs, had already done a 3x, and then it corrected, pulled back strong, and then it went up for its second leg. And this is when these L1s really took off. Okay, now let's contrast that for a moment with what we have, what's the current situation is with AI. Now, I looked at a lot of different AI and compared them to BTC, and I have the charts down here. I have so many BTC pair charts now, but I looked at them all and I wanted to see when did they really start to break out of their accumulation zones. And so TAO, you can see that was November 6th. This was one of the earlier ones. Render, this one isn't as clear, right? And I mentioned this in my last post that a lot of the older tokens and coins that have been around since the last bull market, they tend to oscillate more. They're more centralized, right? So it's not as clear, and some of those I didn't include on the chart because of that. But we're looking for a sustained move up, not just a quick spike up and then back down again. Okay, so that's why I didn't include some of these in here like Fetch, okay? Because this one tends to oscillate a lot, and this is an investor's nightmare in my humble opinion. I have zero interest in investing in something like this. You can see Akash, okay, there is a clear move to the upside that was sustained. This doesn't count because it didn't hold. So here you can see it started in November November 21st. So a lot of these, it started in November. Now this is a newer crypto, okay, NOS, and it started in January, not too long after its release, January 22nd, but that's one of the exceptions here, okay? You can see AGRS, also November 24th, CGBT. Some of these were the same, they were basically the same week, a lot of these, November 21st, OLAS also November 15th, okay? And then you have PAL. This one was a little bit earlier. This is in October. But if we look now and we look at the BTC chart, what do you notice? What is the difference between this and this? Okay? What is the difference? We haven't even come back up to all-time highs yet. Okay? And actually, this is what many will argue at this point. It seems to be very clear that we're actually in here, we're already in the early stages of the bull market. This was the accumulation after markdown, okay? And now we've just broken out. So this is actually the very early stages. So this would be the equivalent of if all of these were starting to take off right around here, right around 14, between say 12 and 15K, okay? That's what we're seeing right now. And so this begs the question, is this just a bubble? Is this the AI bubble that everyone's talking about? Or is this something actually much, much bigger that most of the cryptocurrency world has not yet caught on to? Because let's face it, 17.5 billion really isn't that much market share in the cryptosphere, okay? And add to that the fact that if we just draw some correlations with stocks, which I'm not a huge fan of stocks, but you can see the S&P 500, when did it really start to pick up? Well, you could say that it started to come off of its lows in May here, right? And then it did come back and retest. But now if we take a look at NVIDIA, just as a comparison here, when did NVIDIA really first start to break out? That was around May. It was around mid-May that NVIDIA started to break out. And NVIDIA has been climbing. It's been tremendously outperforming the S&P ever since the S&P really started to come out of its bear market. You could say that this was when the S&P really climbed out of its bear market, okay? And so this happened before everything that we've seen in crypto and with these AI cryptos. So this, in my humble opinion, is a front runner of what we could be seeing here in the weeks and months to come, okay? If we continue at this pace with AI, the way it's been, then it's going to vastly outperform a lot of the L1s from the last bull run, okay? And so just looking at some of these charts again, it's really helpful to see, okay, which one looks the healthiest to you? I would say that this is a very strong chart. A 5-year-old could look at this and say, yeah, it looks like it's going up. TAO BTC, okay? It's in a pullback right now, which is understandable considering it just had a very strong move up for several weeks, okay? But what's really curious about all of this, again, coming back to where is this all breaking out? TAO was one of the front runners, and it happened just days, or you could say within a week or two after the real breakout from accumulation, which we could argue was between 31,500 and 16K, okay? And so this happened very early and organically without any fanfare. Many people still didn't know about it because it wasn't listed on CoinMarketCap yet. It still, to this day, does not have a tier 1 listing, okay, exchange listing. That hasn't happened yet. So that's something that's going to naturally be a catalyst for upward price momentum, okay? But I would argue that this is going to clearly be the winner in this category, not just because it was one of the first ones to break out, but because of the circumstances in which it has been able to thrive. And we see the continued development, and we see other projects now. This is what's really curious about TAO, is that there are other projects, Roku and others, that are starting to get in on the subnets. And so you can think of the subnets like TAO's ecosystem. Just like Solana, what really made Solana and Avalanche blow up was all the development that was happening in their ecosystem, okay? So the ecosystem is really the key. And what other crypto AIs do you see that are developing an ecosystem? crickets, right? Because they don't exist, okay? They're not doing the same thing that TAO is doing. It's a league of its own. And so as far as sustainability and upward price movement, we're well primed here to outperform the likes of Sol and Avalanche and Luna from the last bull run, because these had their moves and it was all at once. And of course, Sol did amazing in the last bull run. But imagine if Sol had started to break out around 14, 15K, because that would be basically the equivalent of where we're at today. Okay, if it had done that and it had continued to move up. Now, there are some that argue that AI is just a bubble, okay, and that this is going to end. Okay, maybe this is just the beginning of the bull market and then other narratives will take over. I don't have a magic crystal ball, but it doesn't seem that way. Just judging from what we're seeing in the stock market and all of the excitement around artificial intelligence. And we know that really the future of AI is decentralized. And if AI is not going anywhere, which it clearly isn't, then we might as well cast our vote for those projects that are in it for the long haul. And so in the short term, will there be other crypto AIs that could outperform TAO? Possibly in the next week or couple of months. But in the long term, this is something that, you know, it would have been like investing in maybe Uniswap versus Solana. Okay, Uniswap had a few features. It's an exchange token, it's a DEX token. It's basically a different category, but it didn't have the same utility as something like Solana. Okay, in Solana, we could say for it to have captured as much market share as it did, I don't know what the exact number is. I remember that ADA, I believe at one point had about 4% of the entire market share at its peak, which ADA is basically a ghost chain that didn't even have smart contract functionality for a long, long time, if you remember correctly. And yet here now we have something that actually has really solid use case, not just one, but many, many different use cases. And so I'm just giving you some of my logic and why I believe that AI is going to be the biggest narrative. And we don't see this with gaming. Okay, we've seen some like Beam has done pretty well, and some of the others, Creo, and some of the gaming platforms have done well in some games, but it's not a cohesive movement that we're seeing. And we're not seeing that either with DPIN. Okay, there are some DPIN projects that have done well, but just comparing them and seeing which are the first movers, because those are most likely going to be the narrative that sticks. Okay, so I hope that you found this video helpful. I want to keep it clear and to the point. And of course, if you have any questions or comments or anything you want to add to that, please feel free. I'm always open to your ideas and suggestions. And if you're interested in buying TAO, I did make a video about that as well, and that's in the highlights on Twitter, and I published it on YouTube as well. And you can buy it on MEXC, and you just sign up using my link. You get some bonuses for making deposits. So there are courses for me as well and books. Don't sign on with imposters who are trying to sell you something on Telegram or WhatsApp. I don't do any of that. I don't have memberships. So anyways, have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.